welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
All right. Okay, very good. Hello. Hi. Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to Theodore's Books in person and virtually to anybody who's out there in the virtual world. A special thank you to the Syosset Library for hooking us up with such a cool author tonight. So before we get started, just really quick, we have all of the copies of Ghost Eaters up at the front counter if you'd like to purchase one. Clay will graciously sign them when we are finished here. That's pretty much it. So without further ado, please welcome Jessica Chotan from the Syosset Library and the Turn the Page, on the road, Turn the Page podcast, and our author tonight, author of the Ghost Eaters, Clay McCleod Chapman.
This is really crazy. So we do have Jen and Melissa here from Syosset Library, and Lauren and
Chloe
from Theodore's, and we want to thank Theodore's so much for letting us do our first live author event. This all started back in April 2020, March 2020, when we couldn't go anywhere, and we just started asking authors if they'd talk with us, and some of them said yes. And then it became something we did frequently, and now we're here live and in person doing something with Clay. So it is. We are also on Zoom and on Facebook Live. If you are tuning in through Zoom and you do have any questions for Clay, either Melissa or Jen will be on hand to address them to Clay, and we'll see if he can answer them. So, well, first of all, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is amazing.
So, I have lots of thoughts about this book, but what I'm really curious about is first, what you have chosen to read, because that might drive where my questions come from.
I mean, it's a tough question. You're throwing the curveballs at me. I don't know what I'm going to read yet. I have choices. We're a diehard. People in the house are pretty horror focused. How horror? We're do we say like PG 27? 20?
Yeah.
Then I was gonna read the prologue, but I feel like let's just kind of jump into the meat of it. But yeah, okay, great. We have cookies, we have coffee, we have
For those who are looking at home, and if you've read the book, you know that this is kind of weird, but we have ghost cookies, but they're not actual ghosts. So
we are now officially ghost eaters. It has happened. We've crossed the line into. It's done. We can go home. I'll read. So yeah, I'm gonna just read further into the book. This is Ghost Eaters is one of these books. It's about a haunted drug. Imagine that there is a pill that you can pop and suddenly you can see the dead. Whatever ghosts were haunting this particular facility, we would now be able to see them. Sounds great, right? The chapter that I'm going to read, or the section I'm going to read, all you need to know is there's a group of friends, and there's our protagonist, Erin, who is a young woman in her early to mid 20s. She has her group of friends includes a gentleman by the name of Tobias, another young woman by the name of Amara, but their group leader, who is this guy by the name of Silas, actually just recently passed away. I'm not going to spoil. That's not a spoiler. He dies pretty early. Yeah. But that kind of kickstarts this whole group because they find this drug called, surprisingly, Ghost. So I'm going to read. They're going to have what we consider maybe like a pill popping seance. So here we go. Hijinks ensue. All right. Tobias doles out another dose of Ghost for each of us. One for you, one for you, One for me. Eye contact, I say, trying to bring a little bit of levity to our drug-induced seance. Cheers, Amara mumbles, not meeting my eyes. And we all pop the pills in our mouths and swallow without another word, chasing them down with as much water as we can stomach. The living room feels different in the daylight, smaller. The night before, the room itself seemed to expand, the wooden beams stretching over our heads. I mean, it felt like we had been devoured by some prehistoric plywood beast. Everything looks harsh and dusty in the sunlight. Close your eyes, Tobias starts. And I glance at Amara before I do, but she won't look at me. We wish to speak with someone we've lost, Tobias announces. His voice sounds far away, as if it's coming from the corner of the living room, even though I can still feel his knee pressed against mine. Silas, if you can hear us, we want you to know that we are here. And I strain my ears as much as I can. I want to hear something, hear him, his voice. Aaron, Tobias squeezes my hand. It's your turn. Reach out to Silas. I don't know what to do. I mean, what am I supposed to say? If my eyes were open, I'd feel like a complete idiot, but behind my eyelids, any feelings of self-consciousness begin to ebb. The presence of both Amara and Tobias slowly recedes from my mind's eye. There's no one else now. It's just me and Silas. Can you hear me? The longer my eyes are closed, the more I notice certain patterns. So, diamond-shaped helixes emerge from the darkness and spiral across my eyelids. It's me, Aaron. The helixes twirl faster at the sound of Silas's name. They fluctuate in color, red to purple to green as they gain speed. Are you there? The temperature rises up my back before radiating through the rest of my body. The room is muggier now. The plastic tarps trap the warmth of the sun in the room. It feels like a sauna overheating. Silas, Tobias says, we're here. Can you hear us? Silas, I jump in. I don't want Tobias to reach him first. I know you're here. The presence of my body, the very sensation of my skin fades. I'm dissolving. I can't tell where my skin is anymore, where I stop and the house starts. Silas, if you can hear me, I want you to know that I never left you. I am the house. Every room is a chamber of my heart. Every hallway an artery, every beam a bone. All I need now is a ghost. I'm ready to be haunted, for Silas's spirit to possess this vessel. I never let you go, Silas. I never meant to hurt you. The fluctuating colors behind my eyelids compress themselves, taking shape, a silhouette. I wish I could take everything back that I said that night. I wish I could go back, and the floor creaks behind me. It's a footstep. It's such an abrupt sound that I can't help but open my eyes, and I am immediately met by harsh sunlight. The sun has shifted seemingly in a matter of minutes, or have we been sitting here for hours now? I don't know. Long enough for the sun to move along its path, the light sliding across the living room. I love you, Silas. I miss you. Pocket of shadow remains in the far corner. The sun can't reach that far into the room. There's something palpable within the darkness, something growing, gaining potency. Then the shadow starts to move. Someone is standing in the corner. Do you see that? I hear myself ask, but it doesn't sound like the words are coming from me. Tobias glances around the room. See what? In the corner. Right over there. Amara won't look. She refuses to see. Her focus remains on the floor, the walls, the ceiling, anywhere but that far corner of the living room, anywhere but there. The silhouette steps forward, out from the shadows. The darkness follows as it somehow it drags the shadow with it, tugging on that black, a web spindling out from the wall. I see him. I see him. Silas? Where is he? Tobias asks, unable to hide his anxiety. His head whips around the room, desperate to see. And when he finally does see him, the stillness that takes over his face is so sudden. It's as if someone just pressed pause on his body. Only his eyes move now, frenzied. He whispers, "It's him." Silas, my throat is too dry. I need water, but I can't look away from him. I can't bring myself to break contact. He might disappear again. Silas, it's me. It's Aaron. Saying his name out loud seems to give him life. I'm giving him life, as if it's enough to endow him with existence once more. Can you hear me, Silas? Can you see me? A name is a vessel. It holds certain syllables, certain cadences. If you say them in a certain order, in a certain rhythm, you're able to invoke the very breath of God. And I want to say Silas's name with life again. I want to say his name out loud and have it sound the way I used to say it when he was alive. I want to say his name with all of my heart, to endow every letter with love, everlasting love. Silas. I cough. There's something caught in my throat, but I can't look away from him. Silas, it's me. I'm here, Silas. Something thick moves up my esophagus. I can hear myself retch. It's wet, labored. Aaron? Amara's hand tightens its grip around mine, squeezing my fingers. Whatever is rising up my throat now blocks the airway. I can't breathe. But Amara yanks on my arm. I pray that the pleading look in my eyes broadcasts the absolute inability to inhale. I can't breathe. My chest heaves once, twice. I can't breathe. The bulge in my throat works its way up. I can't. Silas is gone. And if he'd even been there to begin with. He was, though, wasn't he? Hadn't I seen him? What's wrong? Tobias asks, kneeling before me. What is... I retch once more. My entire body starts to seize. Aaron! A tendril of white, wet substance pushes past my lips. It coils and oscillates in front of my tear-stained face, branching out and upwards, a root reaching for sunlight. Holy shit! Tobias pushes away from me, his eyes fixated on the tendril, but my jaw locks, unable to close as I continue to expel this substance from deep within me. It just keeps coming and coming, whatever it is, unspooling, blooming in the air above our heads. I can't breathe, can't. Amara reaches out to touch it. Don't! Tobias starts. The tip of her index finger barely grazes the surface of that writhing mass, wet and alive. Tobias tries to pull Amara's hand away. Don't touch it! The mass ruptures. Whatever suspended itself in the air immediately loses its hold the moment Amara touches its slippery surface, and it falls to the floor and bursts into a yellowish liquid that appears to contain the contents of my last meal. Trail mix and bile splash across the floorboards. I feel as if I have just broke through the surface of a body of water, finally able to breathe again. I gasp for air, drawing in deep, ragged breaths as I expel the last of the drug from my stomach. Aaron! I finally look at Amara. The terror in her expression is unmistakable. What? I say, hacking uncontrollably. I hold out my arms to her. I need to hold somebody, need to feel safe. What? It's okay. It's okay. I got you. Amara opens her arms and I collapse into her, letting her take my trembling body and keep me from shaking, but I can't stop. She combs the wet hair out of my face with her fingers, using her sleeve to wipe the vomit from my cheeks. What was that? I shriek. Tobias is practically hyperventilating. The elation on his face sends a chill through me because I know exactly what that expression means. It works.
Well, first of all, that's the best introduction. I'm very excited you because I realized I've not formally introduced you, right?
Okay.
Oh, well, okay, so,
Hey, I'm Clay.
hey, Clay, nice to meet you. So Clay, this is, Clay McCleod Chapman, is this your third?
You know, it's funny.
Sort of
I think
third-ish?
it depends who you ask.
Yeah.
It's my third work book.
Mhm.
It is my 10th book.
Yeah,
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 I've been lucky to have a lot of like ups and downs and fail at publishing a lot over the last 20 years. But I guess technically you could say
so Quirk is really an interesting, I don't know that they're officially like, are they an imprint? Or are they sort of their own?
I think they're their own thing. I think they're like, in the, yeah, their Quirk is totally like they're marching to the beat of their own.
Which is why I think that I know I'm drawn to a lot of Quirk books, and I think a lot of people, they really like a lot of the titles that come up. They're just very unique. And so your first book that I knew through Quirk was The Remaking, and that was sort of like it was a very meta film book about a film about something that happened, and then people who are acting in that film, and that was pretty great.
Yeah.
I'm still a little weirded out by the fact that there was a girl named Jessica with red hair, who was,
Yeah.
a little interesting. Thank you for writing about me.
I mean, the remaking was great because it's a urban legend. I mean,
Yes.
it's crazy because
Yeah.
it's actually like it's based on a true story, true crime, if you will. Where in Pilot's Knob, Kentucky, there is a story about a mother and a daughter who the small town believed that they were witches and they were really afraid of them. And they ended up burning both of them for witchcraft. They buried mom in some unmarked grave in the woods. They were so afraid of this little girl, this poor young child. They thought that like because of what they'd done, that she would kind of rise up from the dead and exact revenge. So they buried. This is a true story. They buried her in sanctified ground, church cemetery, under 6 feet of concrete, a bed of gravel, and then wrapped in a fence of interconnected crosses. So they basically say like, she'll never come out. But the story goes that if you go to the Pilot's Knob Cemetery at midnight and you see a little girl wandering around the grave, don't take her hand because she will grab you and drag you down into the ground. And what's amazing about it is that like in this day and age where we have like our cell phones and our own kind of like, or we can make our own mini Blair Witches and just like you can go to YouTube right now and just see people like with their camera phones being like, I'm at the grave, like do you see her? And it like I found that and I just it had to be like that was a story.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was very interesting, and it led me down the roots of that legend.
Yeah.
So the second Quirk book was Whisper Down the Lane, which is a book set sort of in two different time periods, one being the Satanic Panic, and it's very loosely based on the school where
The McMartin preschool.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that
Oh
was
God.
yeah.
Sorry.
yeah. But that was also, it was a fabulous book, and I really like that one. Ghost Eaters is very different, and this book, I know I mentioned this briefly before, this book kind of came to me at a very weird raw time, because so this book is about doing drugs and seeing the dead. And the question is, what would you do to see your dead loved ones again? A month before I read this book, my mom passed. And I was kind of vetting books because I love horror, but I was like, am I able to actually read this book emotionally? How is this going to go? So I was like, okay, let's see where this is. And I found that reading this book, as horrifying as it is, and as, deep into Erin's head that we got, it was almost therapeutic to see a group of people who are so wrapped up in their grief that they will go to these lengths to see the dead. And it was a very almost like cathartic read for me. So I want to know where the roots of this came from for you.
Wow. There are a few roots, and I'll compress them as much as possible. But I feel like what you're speaking about, like, I think I'm obsessed with spiritualism, and in particular the Fox sisters, who, during the Civil War, we were at this point as a country, as a nation, where we had been promised the good death, that we could kind of die at home with our family and loved ones kind of surrounding us, and we could say goodbye. But now, like, sons and husbands and fathers were going across, across the country and dying far, like miles away from home. And spiritualism kind of came at a point where there was a promise of, like, you're the person you've lost and let go of. We can reach out to them and reconnect and tell you, like, basically reach out and touch someone. And whether you believe in that or not, just the kind of the desire to reconnect with somebody who you lost. And for me, one of the kind of origins is this idea of I lost a friend who I was very close to, and I lost him to his addiction. And I did the foolish thing of thinking I was doing tough love and kind of drawing that line of, like, you need to get help and you're not listening to your friends. So I'm going to essentially turn my back on you so that you can, like that would be the kind of galvanizing thing. And it was the wrong decision. And there are a few things in this world that that I truly regret. And this is one of them. And this happened like 15 or so years ago. Like, I still hold on to it. And then, bury that, compartmentalize that emotion. 2017, I'm like, I was tapped to develop a horror movie for Hollywood, where they're like, the concept was haunted drug. Like, let's take they wanted like this production company wanted like a Freddy Krueger, imagine, we all pop this pill and, like, all of a sudden we're at a rock concert and, like, oh my gosh, what, like It Follows had just come out, and they were like, how can we kind of like capitalize on It Follows, and like the drug will be the way in. And the project just collapsed on itself. It never went anywhere. Like, it just kind of fizzled away, as many kind of film deals do. But like, I just, for some reason, those two words, haunted and drug, is like, I took those away with me. Like, I just held on to those. Like, I was just like, what is a haunted drug? Like, what can that be? Like, what can that mean? And like, years, like 2017, 18, 19, 20, like, it was just like holding on to those two same words and thinking, like, well, what is the story behind that? And what is my access point into the entryway? And it's like, I wanted it to be personal. I wanted it to matter, because trying to do it the Hollywood way was kind of a bummer, because it's like you're kind of putting the cart before the horse, and it didn't feel grounded. But it was like, in this kind of ghoulish way that, like, authors consume their own life and the lives of those around them. It was like, oh, this is all of these things, like the idea of like a haunted drug, seeing the dead, like seeing ghosts, what would be the purpose of that? Like, and it was like, oh, like, we can reach out to those that we've lost, and like, so there's no one clear, concise answer. It's like all of these things. It's spiritualism. It's crappy Hollywood movies. It's losing a friend, and like the symbiosis of all those things coming together, and it became this book.
So I think grief is a really powerful driver for a story. And I think when you match grief with horror, it becomes sort of something else completely. And, I've seen it done in many, many different ways, but this one was certainly just very unique. It also has another level of another thing that I like to read about, which is relationships, especially relationships which are somewhat toxic. So Erin is the main character, and she comes from like this really wealthy family. And Silas calls her Little Deb for Little Debutantes, which is kind of charming of him.
Yeah.
He's a charming guy and charming ghost. But Silas himself is, you get the sense that he's very charismatic enough to sort of be the focal point of this friend group. Like everything revolves around what Silas says. Silas says do this, Silas says do that. But with Erin, with Tobias too, but with Erin, she has, no matter how much he pisses her off, no matter how awful things are, Silas is hers, and she just can't let that go. So now that I know what the origin is, although you said it's a lot of things, why did you want to sort of have our protagonist be part of, have been in sort of like a toxic relationship with Silas?
I mean, I feel like we all have those relationships or friendships, and like, you just get to that point where it's like, I can't quit you, and like that in of itself is a form of addiction. And like thinking in terms of like what, I'm casting a few kind of wide nets here. Like I like the idea of like, what is addiction, and how is one an addict to not just narcotics, but like to people, to like, I feel like when I start writing a book, for better or for worse, there are certain kind of keywords.
Yeah.
And like for me in this, like haunting, like haunt, like what is, like just asking the silly question of like, what is it to be haunted? Like, what is it? Like when you start asking, like, this makes me sound like a total stoner, forgive me, but like, it's like if you're just sitting around and you're like, well, what does it mean to be haunted? Like you start like, whoa, wait a minute, like, like it doesn't like, haunted houses, but I could be haunted. Like, you just start like kind of like going in this like massive like rabbit hole of just like, oh well, like, we're all haunted now. And that kind of dovetails into fiction. And it's like, oh my God, like, so like all of those themes and keywords like suddenly become this like book. But you're asking about Erin and Silas and their kind of relationship. I mean, I feel as if Erin, who is given everything in her life, there's the one thing that she wants is the one thing that she shouldn't have, can't have, and it's this guy, Silas. And it's like, it's, I don't know. I've been that person. I've been that person to other people. Like, it's amazing how like, we're just like, and it's written in this post-collegiate way. Like these are postgraduate, like they've graduated from college, undergrad. They're now like in the workforce. Like as a member of that post-collegiate kind of like, what am I going to do with myself life? Like that idea of, I don't know, like I read The Secret History.
Yeah.
And like that is nothing but toxic relationships. And it's such a beautiful book that I was like, oh, what could The Secret History be with ghosts? Like it's like, that's like Secret History, but with ghosts.
So it's funny you say that, because I was actually just talking to Jen about The Secret History and just dark academia impossible in not impossible in general. And it's funny because I see that, because you do have sort of archetypes in a lot of dark academia. You have the person who's wealthy and has everything, you have the person who doesn't have a lot, you have a mentor, and there is a lot of toxicity in it. And I think that, the fact that like a lot of times when, like in the past, like when you read about friend groups, it was, you know, all kind of romanticized as, well, we're our college chums and we're gonna meet up again at the bar. But really, like a lot of dark stuff happens when you have 18-year-olds from different places let out into the world with access to drugs and alcohol and knowledge, and like pretty much like, okay, have fun. Tell your RA if you wind up naked in the middle of the square, you know.
And you feel
Yeah.
singular, you feel
Yeah.
special, like you, like I remember, you know, I was a member of a toxic circle, and we were in our under, like our very kind of, you know, homogenized bubble of a liberal arts school. We were like, we are so singular, we are special, we are gonna take over, we're gonna graduate, and we're gonna take over the world. And the world's not ready for us. Like we're the literary, like we're like, you're Kerouac, you're like you're just like, this is what we're gonna do. And then we graduate and we're like, oh, you were Kerouac at your school, and you were, oh. And then you read the secret history and you're like, oh my God, someone just wrote about it. And you're just like, I'm not a snowflake. I'm not like, it becomes this kind of like, the humbling begins in such a like swift kind of, you know, so yeah, it flushes the toxicity out, hopefully. Like, you get rid of the clever.
I want to just ask a few more questions, and then obviously the audience, or if there's anybody in the virtual audience has questions, we can toss it out to them. But so I love that you talk about haunted people versus haunted houses. I really don't want to talk too much about the drug itself, because this is really a rabbit hole you all need to go down yourself. I promise you, it is very interesting. I loved it. It horrified me. But how did you visualize how the drug would work? And I mean, did you like, were you always like, okay, this drug will definitely somehow lead you to the afterlife? Were you like, well, it's got to be questionable at first, like, because it was very well crafted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the life cycle of the drug itself. I mean, we were creating a new drug. And I think that like the mechanics of it, you know, much to my editor's chagrin, I spent more time like focusing on the like, and then this like the chemical composition, and like these are like the kind of minutia of it. And my editor was like, and we'll take that and we'll throw it away. But like there was like a Breaking Bad version of the manuscript that was, like basically just watching like people like make a.
Wait a second, are we gonna like are we gonna have Ghost Eater's space version?
I mean,
like, really, it's yourself that has the Breaking Bad.
I mean,
Keep on the story.
I really, this is like the first book that I feel like I would totally do a sequel. Like if like because like it's in that kind of like post-apocalyptic way. This is like the pre-apocalypse. Like it's like the zombie apocalypse is starting here. It's like not the 11th hour. It's like maybe 10:30, and like you're like it's like the shit is hitting the fan, but it's not. We're not at like the world is. We're not at Walking Dead, but it's like Ghost Eaters is like, what if there's a new drug that is seeping out into the world, and it is it is a ghost story. It's like the way that you find out about this is more kind of like folklore or urban legend, where it's like, hey, you want to get haunted? Like, you want to like you think of it as like as something that is, it's a street drug that you have to find, you know, in that kind of like ring like fashion. Like you're you know, you can't go to the local pharmacy. It's not like there are not dealers yet, but like imagine something that is about to sweep the nation. I always love, maybe a little sadistically, like, you know, if a story is like, we are on the roller coaster and we are about to the end. Like it's just like that's book one. And if Quirk is listening, I'm ready for book two.
Well, it's actually interesting because I really liked that aspect of it. I liked just that it felt almost like it was building up to this crescendo, and then it kind of it has a wonderful, wonderful twist, and it had like it's go like I don't want to say like it delivers. It 100% delivers. Like you get here and it delivers, but it did have just this really great feeling of you felt something building, and like like you're walking through Greenwich Village and it's 1994 and you hear somebody what's and you're just like, what's that? And it's you. You're gonna like it. What's it be? And you're just like, I don't even know what you're talking about, but now everyone's gonna be talking about it in another year. And it really felt very natural, like that.
It's amazing. It's so amazing. Like I remember, I'm such a prude, so like I don't partake. But like it's funny how you could be like Molly, and you'd be like I remember when like a pre-Molly versus a post-Molly, and like at that cusp of Molly, and people were like, Molly, who's like, but like there is that like that kind of
seen her?
oral tradition of narcotics where it's like something new just starts to seep in, and you got to be like,
what is it, like Special K? Like when I started hearing about that, I'm like, they're like, oh my god, she got hauled out of school because she took too much Special K, and I'm like, what, did she get sick? Was the milk bad? Like, what's going on? But it is like, it does, to quote like the title of one of her other books, it's like a whisper down the lane situation. And then all of a sudden they're talking about it on like Maury. Like, we're gonna take a break from talking about paternity tests.
You've made it when you reach Maury. If you're the topic of
Bill is like, oh, how does it make you feel that we did it to your family because you took Molly? You're like, oh man.
Yeah.
Molly's over. What's next?
Molly was so last year. It's good.
Yeah.
So my other thing is, and this is more to whet the appetite of the audience than to give anything away. Did you know where this was going when you started the story, or did that kind of sneak up on you?
Certain things did sneak up on me.
Okay.
There are certain, I kind of want to get sheepish around twists, but revelations, like that was, there were pleasant surprises for me where like, it was like, oh, wow. Like what if, and then it was like, whoa. And that was like, I mean, and that's kind of what you want. Like, it's amazing how like a book can continue to surprise you as you go. So I knew Erin's trajectory, her kind of like, it's so silly, but like, you have to draw, I usually draw like a picture, like not a diagram per se, but like, what is the shape of the book? So like with Whisper Down the Lane, it's basically a volley of like, bah, 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 bah. So it's like almost like a lightning bolt. But this book is like, zoop, boom. And it's like, like what is the trajectory of someone who is losing their sense of self to their addiction? And like, I just wanted to be like, the world is my oyster, no. And like, and that was the shape of the book. And I always knew that that's what I wanted it to do. But like on the downward spiral, it like there were like pleasant surprises along the way, and that's like that is, I wrote the first draft of the book. Oh my god, my editor hates it when I say this, but like the first draft was like, I turned it in, and to this day I just remember the feedback that I got from my editor was, this book is opaque, unrelentingly grim, and plotless. And it was like, because that was the grief draft. That was the like, I poured and then it was like, okay, now let's kind of build the story, the architecture around the grief. So the emotional, like for this particular book, it was just all like the like getting that out on the page, and then shaping, like sculpting, and the sculpting was when like I would make those pleasant surprises.
I'm opening it up to the audience, and I see Jen.
Yes, thank you so much. This was so great. And in particular, I wanted to talk about the passage that you read, because it was like an amazing performance. Like I've never seen such a like dynamic, engaging reading before. And I'm wondering, like obviously when you're writing, you have to worry about all sorts of things like character and tone and plot. But I wonder, like, is the sound of the words something that you think about when you're writing?
Yes. You know, I'm a ham at heart, so like, you know, I love first person narratives. I love Poe. I love the idea of like an unreliable narrator, but I love the like kind of like the ability to be like, hey, I'm the narrator of this story. Take my hand and I'm gonna tell you a tale. And do you hear that heartbeat in the floorboards? Yeah, I killed my neighbor, but I'm not crazy. But you know, and it's like you kind of have that kind of interaction because you as the reader, you as the audience, like you're basically being asked to meet this book halfway. Like you're having a conversation, and it, you know, it may be one-sided in the sense that all of the content, the story is coming at you, but you as the reader are gestating that and building that up. So first person narrative to me is always a great vehicle because, well, for one thing, third person I just feel like is so all encompassing and all omnipotent that I personally tend to get lost. Where I need the guardrails, I need the training wheels of like if this is the world and it's a very myopic view of the world, like I know there's stuff out here, but I'm filtering it through the perspective of my narrator. And that's really exciting because you're doing two things at once. You're letting the character speak for themselves and you're hearing a story. And like those two, that kind of duality of narrative is always, you know, I just love that. So but yes, there is a certain kind of, I wouldn't say lyricism, but like you know, like I do want a kind of cadence to the text, which, you know, maybe people will pick up on, maybe they won't. You know, I'm gonna die one day, and maybe this book will live a little bit longer than me. It'll be out there somewhere, and maybe when a reader reads it, they'll like hear that that voice. You know, like a little butterfly in a jar.
Yeah,
Punch holes in.
love that.
I have a question. So I'm a big music person and I like to listen to music when I read. So what would you say would be the soundtrack for this book? Like it could be an album or just a singular artist or a
I
song.
love that.
Well, it's a shameless plug. Quirk actually allowed me to do a Spotify playlist. So there is, if you go to the Quirk Spotify page, there is a play like the Cozy News playlist, but it's such a downer of a mix. It's like poor to say. Billie Eilish. Like, it's just like moody. Like, it's a lot of moody tunes.
That's awesome.
But I like it.
Oh, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, I some Tom York on here.
Oh yes,
Do it.
Yeah.
Radiohead.
that's the mood.
It's like,
Tom Waits.
oh my God, you got to.
Yeah.
That's funny. You did the first secret came to my head was they're coming to take me away.
Tom scares me so much.
It's creepy.
Mhm.
It's terrifying. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Oh, two questions.
You wanna go, Chloe?
Oh, sure. Okay. It kind of, you know what? It's actually kind of aligns with what you just asked. I feel like when you are writing, there's typically like a collecting period.
Yeah.
So you kind of spoke to this with the secret history. Was there anything else that, you know, you were reading or was an influence for you? It doesn't necessarily have to be books. It could be like music or literally anything.
So much. And I feel like I needed to pay lip service to them at the back of the book. So there's like a whole reading list of.
Oh, wow.
every-
That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I just had to I feel like even if it's not quote unquote research, I mean, I read a lot of books. There's like, hallucinatory experience.
Yeah.
But like also, I feel like some people be like, I try not to read too much stuff within the world of this story because I don't want to be indirectly influenced by it. But for better or for worse, I choose the opposite, and I just like want to immerse myself in everything. For one, to be like, oh well, they did that, so I can't do that, or they did that, so maybe I can trying to kind of maneuver through a world because where there's this thing of there's no new stories, there's just different ways to tell them, and I feel like you read a book and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And like, you know, like, what is your interpretation of the Frankenstein myth or the vampire story, or the, like, you know, what's your spin on it? And I feel like it's more about, like, I wrote a haunted house book, like this is a
Yeah.
haunted house book. But why should we ever write a haunted house book now that we have the Haunting of Hill House? Like that's the book, that's the definitive, for me, that's the definitive, like,
I love
haunted
that
house book. But it's like, well, you can take that, and it's not that you're gonna better it, but you can riff or look at like I am the second cousin twice removed of Haunting of Hill House. Like ghost, you know, like, you just like, you look at your family tree and it's like, you know, these are the books that influenced it. But basically shirking away from your question by saying, yes, I did. But you gotta read the book, because like I mean, I mean, there's just so many, like, I mean, Pet Cemetery,
Oh, love.
Mexican Gothic,
Mm.
The Return, you know, we were talking about Rachel Harrison, like, no lie, Rachel Harrison, I read The Return, and I was like, that was the first, that, like, you know, another route where it's like, oh, you can have a group of friends in their early-ish whatevers who are straining under the kind of, like, they're pulling apart. And I just love that, her voice. So like, in a weird kind of obtuse way, this is just Rachel Harrison fanfic, because like, I wanted to kind of encapsulate the kind of the levity of her voice to something really scary and really supernatural. So yeah.
One thing Rachel Harrison does really well, and then I'll go right to Melissa, I just have to put it out there, is she makes really like mundane conversations that are slightly awkward somehow horrifying.
She's great.
She's great, yeah. Melissa.
When you were writing, it kind of goes off of what Chloe was saying. When you were writing, you had the scene you read had the very visual, vomiting scene of what I'm calling ectoplasm.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
do
actually.
research on that? Because it immediately reminded me of the T.G. Hamilton case.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, like, there are some lines being straddled here where it's like, is it a drug? Are they hallucinating? Or is this a supernatural experience? Like, is that vomit or is that ectoplasm? Is it a spirit? Is it, you know, like, so like, yes, like, all, like, I did a decent amount of research into just the kind of seances, like, you know, like channeling spirits, like the physical effluvia of, you know, a phantasmic entity, you know, like, and you know, it ties in to what the drug is, and like how, like, so, you know, at a certain point, it's kind of like, well, is it this or is it this? Is it a hallucination or is it is it supernatural? And like, for at least a few pages, maybe there can, like, it's toggling that line, like, and you know, someone will be like, they were totally tripping their balls. And someone else will be like, that was a ghost. And like, she just puked. That was ectoplasm. And like, that was the hope for the beginnings of it, until they're like in it and addicted to it. And then they're like, ghosts. Ghosts everywhere. See dead people.
I have one more, if that's okay. I don't know if this question is like interesting or obnoxious yet, so we'll see when it's done. So one of the things I've been thinking about while you're talking is just like addiction and the toxic friendships and how this all overlaps. And something in another interview that I did recently about with a book about addiction, an author told me that addiction is not about the substance, but rather it is about the emotion that the substance gives you. And I'm wondering if like toxic friendships work that way too. Like, do all these people want to see Silas because they want to see him, or are they addicted to the way that he made them feel?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yes, I you know, it's so funny how like you have your group. I mean, like, I distinctly remember my group of friends, and there was like the charismatic leader. And it was almost cult-like how like they were fiercely intelligent, fiercely outgoing, fiercely confident on the surface, and just like you get swept into that. And it's like, well, he knows what he's doing, she knows what she's doing, and it's like you're like, I'll follow that person and then it's not until you graduate or summer break where you're like, oh my God, what, like the hangover, the miasma kind of like fades, and you're just like, what did I do? And like it's like, what did I say? Or like, it's only when you get removed or kind of extract yourself from it that you're like, oh wow, we're either really bad people or like, it's not that all circles with charismatic, leaders are bad, but it's when it gets toxic that it gets really bad. And then you kind of you have to recognize in yourself, why am I succumbing to that undertow? And I am not the charismatic leader type. I'm more the like, okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
And then like I'm arrested 5 months later and I'm like, how did I get to this point?
Yeah.
I followed that.
Kind of, that almost sounds like Simpsons like.
Yeah.
What was it where he joins the call and it's like, no, leader.
Yeah.
No, leader. Yeah, well, do we have any other questions? Oh, man, okay, I'll go to Rob. Yes.
Is there, writing something like this that you have such personal connection to, emptying the bucket, putting so much yourself into it, is the next thing that you're going to work on going to have as much of you or past experience in it as this?
Oh man. I mean, yes and no. This one casts a really long shadow over the next thing that I'm working on. And I'm gonna be cagey about it because like it hasn't been, but there's a thing that I'm working on. And it is the choices I made was like, okay, well, this is what I did for Ghost Eaters. And like, but like, I'm very lucky right now where Quirk has been very encouraging to say, you want to write another book? Let's write another book. And they've allowed me to do that. And like remaking to Whisper to Ghost Eaters, like they all kind of inform each other. So I'm having a creative conversation with myself. So the conversation I've had with myself post Ghost Eaters is like, okay, you hit a nerve with Ghost Eaters. The thing you have to do is just like, it's just so stupid because it's just like, you're gonna, like, it's a furthering of, not themes per se, but just the kind of like, I'm like in a place where I'm just like, oh, you think Ghost Eaters was about grief? Like, it's also about grief. It's dirge, and my editor hates me. So it's like, so
A rainbow or a unicorn somewhere.
you have to entice your reader, and like, I guess there's something to be said about like, you look at a book, you're not going to judge a book by its cover, but you're going to see the kind of like moody, like dirgy goth guy, and he's just like, you want to talk? You and then you're just like, like you're gonna feel that, and so I'm in a place right now where the kind of conversation since then was like, I went, it wasn't so much that I went the opposite way as much as I just like embedded, like I just dug in, for better or for worse. Jury is out. I'm in trouble. But it is, post that experience, I'm in the midst of that experience, but post, I'm already feeling the desire to do something fun and something
Nice.
not light, but like nimble. I want to do a nimble. Kind of like, we'll see if I can ever publish ever again.
So could you see this as either a film or a series, and who would you cast in it?
Oh,
I'm never good at the casting question, so I may abstain. Well, just because there's always like the person who would be better, and I'm always like, what's that person? It's the actress in that show with the bangs.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's the
Flight attendant.
I just but
So you just know.
movie,
Mm.
but totally TV show. Like, I mean, like, it's so funny, like, because now the conversations I'm having are like, is it a movie or is it a TV show? And I'm always like, yeah, okay. Like, it's like, yeah, go for it. And you know, I don't know, like I feel like my default, it will always be feature, because that's just what I grew up imbibing and loving. We're now in a expand the universe, expand the narrative, and I get that, but I would, if whoever wants to come call in and say this is a TV show, like there is a TV show version, there is a series version, like, I mean, it is just, like the door opens and it's like you could just keep on going, like there's more story that could be told. And I would be so happy with that. I almost feel like this is almost a prologue to what could be there in that Breaking Bad, in that you know, like just like there's something that has a life, but we're only seeing the beginning of that life, which is exciting. But I don't know. I just love movies. I love movies.
Yeah. Cool, very good. Any other questions? No? Well, definitely, you know, it's so funny because I for a while, like I had in my mind somebody who I was like, oh yeah, that person would be a great Erin, and now I cannot remember who.
She was the one in
She was
that
the one with
movie.
the bang.
Yeah.
That's the one,
Yeah.
I mean, when I pitched it, it was funny. It was like, it's Train Spotting meets Poltergeist. But
Mm.
then when I started writing it, it's like, it's Euphoria meets Poltergeist. So it's like, maybe Zendaya's not, you know, I don't know, like, you know, like,
Well, you know, it's tough because I feel like sometimes, when you kind of have to, depending on what it is, because I've certainly been like a person who's been like, oh my God, this book was, this adaptation was awful, that person was terrible. But, you know, I think like with the whole ability to expand and with books to TV becoming sort of more of the standard where you can, you know, because when you asked that question, I was like TV series immediately, like I could 100% picture where this begins and like where the first episode ends, where she's just looking at that shadow.
Yeah.
And like silence and then moody theme song. Moody credits.
Yeah.
Tom, you're 40. But you know, I think that we do kind of live in a place where, you know, like I was just telling you about talking about the Brady Hendrix. There's like, I'm really excited about My Best Friend's Exorcism, but I was hoping for a mini series because I just want to live in the world of that book so much.
Yeah, the one series that I feel like did an adaptation amazingly well was Watchmen. HBO Watchmen. That series, like, you know, it basically said, you love the graphic novel, there's no way we're ever gonna get that right. So we're gonna take all of the DNA of Watchmen, just like shake it up and like blast it out. And like I love Watchmen because everybody coming into it wanted to hate Watchmen so much. They were ready. They were like, you can't adapt my Watchmen. This is sacred text. Like, you're gonna ruin it, and I'm gonna hate watch it. And then you watch it, and you're like, wait a minute, where, like, it was so discombobulating because it was just like, I have no concept of where I am or where this is in relationship to the story. And then you like realize that the narrative is just like, it's spreading out and it's like reaching out into, it's like furthering the text. And I just thought that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's funny, like books to movies that I've complained about and then like kind of seeing go into TV. Not all of them are horror. First of all, I am very sad to this was a podcast. I am very sad that Archive 81 is not getting a second.
Oh yeah, that's
If anybody is a horror
Oh,
person, oh my God. That ended, I know, right? I was like, I feel like this is like Stranger Things for adults, but also like, you know, like I liked it. It was good. It had like, it had that 90s nostalgia, which I like because that was my childhood. But as far as like books that were movies that I just was like, ugh. And then they adapted it into a TV series. I would say this is kind of horror adjacent because it kind of plays up the Penny Dreadful, but I was not a fan of the Series of Unfortunate Events movie. I thought it was beautiful, but I have this thing about Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey. He nails it. He went away and didn't do it for a while, and he does it in Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm like, fine, Jim, you can be classic Jim. But with Count Olaf, who's a creepy character for many reasons, I was like, yeah, no, he's too Jim Carrey. But the TV series,
The Netflix series
series
was
is
much better.
it's beautiful.
You're just saying that because Neil
dark.
Patrick Harris is in it.
Neil Patrick Harris can read the back of the special K box, and I'll be like, whatever you want.
Which Special K?
Yeah, I mean, it was good, you know, like he nailed the ego, he nailed the creepiness, and just the way that they kind of expanded the world was really well done. But there's a lot of books to, you know, that I'm liking, but I am another thing, that horror. I'm very much looking forward to how they're going to adapt Percy Jackson, because I felt that was like they were literally sitting on a gold mine, and they're just like, yeah, we're not going to do any of this. We're going to cast 30-year-olds to play 12-year-olds, and just like it. And we're like,
I'm waiting for Salem's Lot. That's the
Salem's
next one,
Lot.
yeah.
Yeah, very good. Anyway, any other questions? Anything from cyberspace? No. All right. Well, thank you so much to Theodore's Books for allowing us to have this partnership. For making the go and other things, and to Clay McCleod Chapman. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, all,
Okay,
and
I'm going
virtual
shopping
land.
now.